I'm Daniel Levine, and this is the Bio Report. About 500,000 people suffer from a spinal cord injury each year. Treatments can involve surgical procedures to stabilize the spine and physical rehabilitation, which can have limited benefits. There are currently no FDA-approved therapies that can promote repair and improve function following a spinal cord injury. NervGen Pharma is seeking to change that by developing therapies that allow the nervous system to repair itself. We spoke to Mike Kelly, CEO of NervGen, about the potential for using therapies designed to allow the nervous system to repair itself, how the company's lead experimental candidate for spinal cord injury works, and why the same approach holds promise in treating a range of neurodegenerative diseases. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
We're going to talk about spinal cord injuries, NervGen, and its efforts to develop a regenerative therapy to treat these injuries. Let's start with the problem, though. How common are spinal cord injuries?
There are about 18 to 19,000 spinal cord injuries each year in the United States. There's roughly 300,000 people living with a spinal cord injury in the U.S. So they're very common.
What's the impact for people with these injuries, and what's the impact on the healthcare system?
It's a tremendous impact on the individual as well as the healthcare system. It's actually one of the largest costs to the healthcare system in both the U.S. and Canada. These folks are mostly men. 75% of the time, it's men. In their early 40s, and they have an accident. Typically, it's a vehicle accident or a fall, and their life is changed in an instant, forever. They go through they're hospitalized immediately. They typically get surgery to relieve compression on their back, and then they have a lifetime of rehabilitation. And typically, they'll get a little bit better over the course of the first 9 to 12 months, but then it plateaus because the spinal cord, the central nervous system is not easily repaired. It doesn't, the body doesn't really fix itself too well. Unlike other injuries where you break your bone, your body fixes itself pretty well, not in the central nervous system.
What treatment options exist today, and what's generally the prognosis for someone with such an injury?
There are no drugs available to treat patients today. There's a lot of experimental therapies that are being studied. Right now, the only method of rehabilitation is exercise and work and pushing yourself. So I've talked to several folks who have suffered spinal cord injury, and they push themselves to remake connections in their central nervous system. So there's a lot of experimental things you'll see in the news, but no drugs have been FDA approved for these folks.
NervGen's working to develop regenerative therapies. Before we talk about that, I thought it might be useful to explain what happens in spinal cord injuries with regard to CSPGs. What are CSPGs? What's their role, and how do they interfere with repair of the nervous system?
Sure. So CSPG stands for chondroitin sulfate proteoglycans. It's easier just to say CSPGs. These are molecules that are in our brains and our spinal cord. They act like glue to hold nerve connections together. Normally, they help keep your spinal cord, all of your nerves in place and make sure that your nervous system works properly. So that's their role. When someone gets injured and they injure their spinal cord, there's an upregulation or an accumulation of CSPGs around the injury site. And they actually protect so well that they limit axonal sprouting. So axons can't sprout and they can't regenerate. So they actually become inhibitory. They create an inhibitory environment, and they impede what's called remyelination, which is the protective coating around axons, and regeneration. So the end result is a reduced ability for the body to repair itself and to remap its capabilities and rewire the spinal cord. So as a result, it becomes a lot harder for somebody to heal, and it can be very difficult for folks to recover from these types of injuries.
Your lead experimental therapy is NVG-291. What is NVG-291?
NVG-291 it's a small molecule. It's a peptide, and what it is it's a peptide that blocks the signals that CSPGs talk to cells. So when CSPGs are upregulated and creating this inhibitory environment, we found out that NVG-291, when it's used, it interferes with this signaling and it allows the body to repair itself more effectively. This has been proven in animals in many different disease models, and we're now currently studying it in spinal cord injury in patients.
Well, how does it work?
Well, it helps the body. It inhibits the inhibitor is the simplest way to explain it. So CSPGs are inhibiting or creating this environment, and what NVG-291 does is it inhibits the inhibitor. So it enhances the body's ability to repair itself. So the body can regenerate, remyelinate, and enhance plasticity and allow nerves to regrow.
The company was co-founded by Harold Punnett, whose daughter-in-law became a T11 paraplegic following an accident. What happened?
Yeah, so Harold's daughter-in-law, Cody, had a fall. She fell and she hurt her back. She has what was called a complete injury. So it's a complete sever of the spine at T11, which is thoracic vertebrae 11. And she became a paraplegic. Yeah, so she had this injury, and actually Harold went on a quest to discover any cure in development to help Cody and help people like Cody who were suffering from spinal cord injury. He came across Dr. Jerry Silver's work and his research at Case Western Reserve University. In the late 80s, Dr. Silver had been focusing on these inhibitors and how they work against CSPGs and enhance plasticity. So through a collaboration with Dr. Silver, he outlicensed this technology, raised some capital, and started a company. And that was the founding of NervGen.
Well, what's known about 291 from studies that have been done to date?
Well, we know, number one, that it's safe. We've completed a phase 1 study, which is a safety study in humans. We completed that last year, submitted that data to the FDA, and that gave us the ability to now enter into efficacy trials to measure the product's effectiveness in helping regenerate nerves and help people with spinal cord injury. So we're in what's called a phase 1b/2a trial that's currently underway. But we know that it works in animals. We have a lot of animal data, a lot of studies that were done in rodents with spinal cord injury, as well as with stroke and with disease models for multiple sclerosis, for remyelination. So we know that the effects that we're seeing this effect in animals. Now we've done a safety study in humans, and now we're attempting to show that efficacy in humans, and we'll know in a not too distant future.
As you just alluded, you're looking at this as a potential treatment for a range of neurodegenerative conditions. Do they all involve scarring? Is that a common quality of them? And does the same repair mechanism you're focused on in spinal cord injury get short circuited in these conditions?
Well, they involve some level of scarring, yes, but they also involve upregulation of CSPGs, which cause this environment um, really to protect the central nervous system, but it protects it and inhibits repair. Um, so we know for multiple sclerosis that myelin demyelination is a major issue. That's a major issue in spinal cord injury as well. So the way that our drug works, if we prove that it works in spinal cord injury, we will be looking at other disease models. We will, obviously we have data with this molecule in a stroke model, as I mentioned, as well as an MS model. So we're a small company with limited resources, so we have to pick a lane, and we picked spinal cord as our first venture into human clinical trials.
Well, it's interesting when you have to make those types of development decisions. What was the thinking in leading with spinal cord injury?
Well, we have very strong data in the animal models in spinal cord injury. Obviously, the founding, Harold Punnett founding the company with his daughter-in-law in mind was a big factor. But we also have fantastic animal model data. And we as a management team got together shortly after I joined, and we did a portfolio review. Typical what companies will do is they'll look at the disease models, they'll look at the data that they have, they'll look at the clinical pathway and the regulatory pathway. And we felt that spinal cord injury was our best path forward, and that's why we chose that first.
And where are you in development efforts beyond spinal cord injury? What does the pipeline look like right now?
Well, NVG-291, we will be doing other studies in stroke as well as MS and ALS. We also have another molecule, NVG-300, which we're advancing as well. Our plan is we have to first do animal studies with that molecule. We'll be announcing something probably at the end of Q2 of this year about that product and the potential product and the path that we're taking. But with NVG-291, as I mentioned earlier, we had to pick a lane. The further down the path you go in a clinical development, the more expensive the trials get. So with the limited resources that we have as an organization, spinal cord injury is our first. Once we get positive results there, we'll circle back and go after stroke, ALS, and MS.
And in those other indications, would you expect to use this as a monotherapy, or might it be used in combination with other medications?
Well, I think the first proof of concept is monotherapy. We fully expect that spinal cord injury is ultimately going to be multiple types of modalities to help patients. We know that we definitely want to use NVG-291 in those multiple modalities, but at first we need to prove it in monotherapy.
NervGen is a public company. It's raised $10 million in 2019. The markets have changed significantly, although NervGen is trading above its $1 IPO price. I think at that time people were happy to go public to access less expensive capital, but for a company with a single early asset, being public can be tough. Do you find it helps or hinders your efforts to raise money?
It was probably early for a company to go public, but our shareholders have been great. We have a very strong group of supporters. We started off with a small group of investors in Vancouver, Canada, and we've grown this investor base over time. We're now traded in the U.S. On the OTC, but we're also traded in Canada on TSX. And we're largely a retail held stock. We have several institutional investors that just came in recently. We just completed a financing in Canada several months back and raised $23 million. So we have a strong following. I don't think it's hindered us. It's actually only helped us because of our strong support.
And how far will existing cash take you, and what's the plan for raising additional capital?
We have enough cash right now to get us through Q3 of 2025. We will likely raise more capital when we have the readout from the study that's currently underway. As I mentioned, there's two different groups in the study. Folks that have chronic spinal cord injury is the first group that we're studying. Those are folks that have had an injury 1 to 10 years ago. And then we'll move on to another group, which is called subacute, and they have more recent injury. But once we have our data, we're enrolling right now in the chronic. We just announced our guidance to look at completing enrollment in Q3 of this year. It's a 16-week study, so we'll announce once we're done enrollment, we'll announce when we expect to have data, and we'll likely do a financial raise on the back of that data.
Mike Kelly, CEO of NervGen. Mike, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks for listening. The Bio Report is a production of the Levine Media Group. To automatically download this podcast each week, subscribe to our RSS feed or through iTunes or other podcast manager. To join our mailing list, go to levinemediagroup.com. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to drop us a line or are interested in sponsoring this podcast, send email to danny@levinemediagroup.com. Special thanks to Jonah Levine, who composed our theme music, and the Jonah Levine Collective, which performs it.